What I am trying to do and what a public option will help do is put affordable health care within reach for millions of Americans. And to help ensure that everyone can afford the cost of a health care option in our exchange. We need to provide assistance to families who need it. That way, there will be no reason at all for anyone to remain uninsured. Indeed, it's because I'm confident in our ability to give people the ability to get insurance at an affordable rate that I'm open to a system where every American bears responsibility for owning health insurance. So long as we provide a hardship waiver for those who still can't afford it as we move towards the system. The same is true for employers. While I believe every business has a responsibility to provide health insurance for its workers, small businesses that can't afford it should receive an exemption. And small business workers and their families will be able to seek coverage in the exchange if their employer is not able to provide it. Now, here's some good news. Insurance companies have expressed support for the idea of covering the uninsured, and they certainly are in favor of a mandate. I welcome their willingness to engage constructively in the reform debate. I'm glad they're at the table. But what I refuse to do is simply create a system where insurance companies suddenly have a whole bunch of more customers on Uncle Sam's dime. But still fail to meet their responsibilities. We're not going to do that. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. We need to end the practice of denying coverage on the basis of pre-existing conditions. The days of cherry-picking who to cover and who to deny, those days are over. I know you see it in your practices, and how incredibly painful and frustrating it is. You want to give somebody care and you find out that the insurance companies are wiggling out of paying. This is personal for me also. I've told this story before. I'll never forget watching my own mother. As she fought cancer in her final days, spending time worrying about whether her insurer would claim her illness was a pre-existing condition so it could get out of providing coverage. Changing the current approach to pre-existing conditions is the least we can do. For my mother and for every other mother, father, son, and daughter. Who has suffered under this practice, who've been paying premiums and don't get care. We need to put health care within the reach for millions of Americans. Now, even if we accept all of the economic and moral reasons for providing affordable coverage to all Americans, there is no denying that expanding coverage will come at a cost, at least in the short run. But it is a cost that will not, I repeat, will not add to our deficits. I've set down a rule for my staff, for my team, and I've said this to Congress: health care reform must be and will be deficit neutral in the next decade. Now, there are already voices saying the numbers don't add up. They're wrong. Here's why. Making health care affordable for all Americans. Will cost somewhere on the order of $1 trillion over the next 10 years. That's real money, even in Washington. But remember, that's less than we are projected to have spent on the war in Iraq. And also remember, failing to reform our healthcare system in a way that genuinely reduces cost growth will cost us trillions of dollars more in lost economic growth and lower wages. That said, let me explain how we will cover the price tag. First, as part of the budget that was passed a few months ago, we put aside $635 billion over 10 years in what we're calling a health reserve fund. Over half of that amount, more than $300 billion, will come from raising revenue by doing things like modestly limiting the tax deductions the wealthiest Americans can take to the same. Level that it was at the end of the Reagan years, same level that it was under Ronald Reagan. Some are concerned that this will dramatically reduce charitable giving. For example, but statistics show that's not true. And the best thing for our charities is the stronger economy that we will build with healthcare reform. But we can't just raise revenues. We're also going to have to make spending cuts. In part by examining inefficiencies in our current Medicare program. There are going to be robust debates about where these cuts should be made, and I welcome that debate. But here's where I think these cuts should be made. First, we should end overpayments to Medicare Advantage. Today, we're paying Medicare Advantage plans much more than we pay for traditional Medicare services. Now, This is a good deal for insurance companies. It's a subsidy to insurance companies. It's not a good deal for you. It's not a good deal for the American people. And by the way, it doesn't follow free market principles. For those who are always talking about free market principles, that's why we need to introduce competitive bidding into the Medicare Advantage program. A program under which private insurance companies are offering Medicare coverage. That alone will save. $177 billion over the next decade, just that one step. Second, we need to use Medicare reimbursements to reduce preventable hospital readmissions. Right now, almost 20% of Medicare patients discharged from hospitals are readmitted within a month. Often because they're not getting the comprehensive care that they need. This puts people at risk, it drives up cost. By changing how Medicare reimburses hospitals, we can discourage them from acting in a way that boosts profits but drives up costs for everyone else. That will save us $25 billion over the next decade. Third, we need to introduce generic biologic drugs into the marketplace. These are drugs used to treat illnesses like anemia. But right now, there is no pathway at the FDA for approving generic versions of these drugs. Creating such a pathway will save us billions of dollars. We can save another roughly $30 billion by getting a better deal for our poorer. Seniors, while asking our well-off seniors to pay a little more for their drugs. So that's the bulk of what's in the Health Reserve Fund. I've also proposed saving another $313 billion in Medicare and Medicaid spending in several other ways. One way is by adjusting Medicare payments to reflect new advances and productivity gains in our economy. Right now, Medicare payments are rising each year by more than they should. These adjustments will create incentives for providers to deliver care more efficiently. And save us roughly $109 billion in the process. Another way we can achieve savings is by reducing payments to hospitals for treating uninsured people. I know hospitals rely on these payments now, legitimately. Because of the large number of uninsured patients that they treat. But if we put in a system where people have coverage and the number of uninsured people goes down with our reforms, the amount we pay hospitals to treat uninsured people should go down, as well. Reducing these payments gradually, as more and more people have coverage, will save us over $106 billion. And we'll make sure the difference goes to the hospitals that need it most. We can also save about $75 billion through more efficient purchasing of prescription drugs. And we can save about $1 billion more by rooting out waste, abuse, fraud throughout our healthcare system so that no one is charging more for a service than it's worth or charging a dime for a service that they don't provide. Let me be clear, I'm committed to making these cuts in a way that protects our senior citizens. In fact, these proposals will actually extend the life of the Medicare Trust Fund by 7 years. And reduce premiums for Medicare beneficiaries by roughly $43 billion over the next 10 years. And I'm working with AARP to uphold that commitment. Now, for those of you who took out your pencil and paper altogether. These savings mean that we put about $950 billion on the table, and that doesn't count some of the long-term savings that we think will come about from reform from medical IT, for example, or increased investment in prevention. So that stuff in congressional jargon is not scorable. The Congressional Budget Office won't count that as savings, so we're setting that aside. We think that's going to come, but even separate and far from that, we put $950 billion on the table. Taking us almost all the way to covering the full cost of healthcare reform. In the weeks and months ahead, I look forward to working with Congress to make up the difference so that healthcare reform is fully paid for in a real, accountable way. And let me add that this does not count longer-term savings. I just want to repeat that. By insisting that the reforms that we're introducing are deficit neutral over the next decade. And by making the reforms that will help slow the growth rate of healthcare. Costs over the coming decades bending the curve, we can look forward to faster economic growth. Higher living standards, and falling, instead of rising, budget deficits.